In the small town of Hope Springs, where time seemed to flow at its own pace, lived Emily Wilson. Daughter of Charles and Betty, owners of the only grocery store in the central square, the 9-year-old girl already showed an unexplainable connection with animals. While other children played tag and with dolls, Emily spent hours observing birds that landed on her windowsill or feeding stray dogs that appeared behind the grocery store. "That girl has a gift," commented Mrs. Elaine, a regular customer at the store, while watching Emily calm a frightened kitten. "It's like she speaks their language." Betty smiled, accustomed to comments about her daughter. "She's been like that since she was tiny. Charles even jokes that we should have had a farm, not a grocery store." The town of Hope Springs was surrounded by rural properties, some traditional, passed down from generation to generation. Among them, the Marshall Ranch stood out for its buffalo herd, a rarity in the region. The owner, Jack Marshall, a reserved man, rarely appeared in town, but his name was constantly mentioned in conversations at the gazebo in the square. "They say he brings these beasts from other continents," Mr. Jeremy, the barbershop owner, would say. "Buffalo aren't animals for these parts, but old Marshall has always been different from the rest." On that particularly hot summer afternoon, Emily went out with her notebook and a chewed pencil in the pocket of her denim overalls. She had asked her parents' permission to explore the trails surrounding the town. She knew those paths well, but each visit revealed a new discovery, a bird's nest, tracks of wild animals, or flowers she hadn't seen before. The trail that passed behind the Marshall Ranch was one of her favorites. From there she could sometimes glimpse the enormous buffalo grazing in the distance. Those animals held a special fascination for her, so large and strong, but with deep eyes that seemed to carry ancient wisdom. The sun was beginning to set when Emily heard a different sound, a low moan, a kind of lament. Following the instinct that always guided her, she approached a damaged fence that separated the trail from Marshall land. The sound was coming from inside the property. Carefully, she passed through the gap in the fence and followed the noise. That's when she spotted a large dark-coated female buffalo walking in circles and making distressed sounds. A few meters away, almost hidden in the tall grass, a small shape was moving with difficulty. Emily felt her heart race. It was a newborn calf, still with its umbilical cord, separated from its mother and unable to stand on its own. The adult buffalo seemed desperate, but couldn't reach the calf, which had slipped beyond a small embankment. "Calm down, I'll help," Emily murmured, as if the animal could understand her. Without hesitation, she approached the calf. Her movements were slow and deliberate, so as not to frighten either the mother or the newborn. The adult buffalo watched attentively, snorting and stamping its hooves on the ground, torn between distrust and hope. The calf was heavy, even for a newborn, but Emily managed to drag it closer to its mother. Her small hands firmly held the trembling animal, while her feet slipped in the mud. Her flowered cotton dress was completely dirty, but that didn't matter. The girl could only think about reuniting mother and child. "Everything will be all right," she whispered, feeling the calf's heart beating rapidly against her hands. When she finally managed to bring the baby buffalo to its mother, she stepped back a few paces and observed the reunion. The adult buffalo licked her calf slowly, helping it clean up and stand. It was a scene of pure magic. The power of maternal instinct, the fragility of new life, the powerful bond between the two. Leaning against a nearby tree, Emily watched with tears in her eyes. There was something sacred in that moment, something beyond words. The buffalo raised her head and looked directly at her. There was no more fear or distrust in that gaze, only a calm understanding. "You're welcome," said Emily, smiling. The sun was almost setting when the girl returned home. Her dirty and torn dress quickly caught her mother's attention. "Good heavens, child, what happened to you?" Emily told her about the buffalo calf, her eyes still shining with emotion. Betty listened with a mixture of pride and concern. "You have a heart of gold, sweetheart, but you need to be careful. Those animals are dangerous and entering Mr. Jack's ranch without permission." "I know, Mum, but I had to help." Charles, who was listening to the conversation while closing the grocery store, intervened. "Our Emily was born with this gift. Remember when she calmed Mr. Anthony's horse that no one could tame?" That night, lying in her bed, Emily couldn't get the image of the buffalo and her calf out of her mind. Something about that encounter had deeply marked her soul, as if an invisible thread had formed, connecting her fate to that animal's. Without knowing it, that day would change the course of her life forever. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit like. Tell us what city you're watching from. We'll continue. The years passed quickly in Hope Springs, like pages being turned by the wind on the porches of old houses. Emily grew up but never lost that special connection with animals that everyone recognized as a gift. Every time she passed near the Marshall Ranch, she felt a peculiar shiver, a kind of silent call. Many times she would stop at the mended fence and observe the buffalo in the distance, always wondering if among them was that calf she had saved years ago. High school came to an end, and with it, important decisions loomed like storm clouds. On a Sunday afternoon, sitting on the porch with her parents, Emily finally verbalized what was already clear to everyone. "I want to study veterinary medicine in Denver," she said, while petting the head of Popcorn, the mongrel she had adopted. After finding him abandoned on the road, Charles and Betty exchanged glances. It wasn't a surprise, but the confirmation brought a bittersweet taste. "The big city is different from here, honey," Charles pondered, scratching his graying beard. "The pace, the people, everything is faster." "I know, Dad, but I need to go. There's no veterinary college here, and that's been my dream since—" She hesitated, remembering the little buffalo, those moist eyes and the warmth of life pulsing under her hands. Since forever. The news soon spread throughout the town. Emily, the girl who talked to animals, was going to the capital to study. Reactions were varied. Some thought it was a waste, that she should stay and take over her parents' grocery store. Others, like Teacher Margaret, celebrated. "She was always special," the teacher would say at the Squares Cafe. "She has an intelligence that needs space to flourish." On the eve of her departure, Emily felt an inexplicable impulse. She walked to the boundary of the Marshall Ranch, following the same path from that distant day. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and red when she spotted a huge buffalo at the edge of the fence. It was a male with imposing horns and deep eyes that seemed fixed on her. "Could it be you?" whispered Emily, approaching cautiously. The animal remained motionless, observing her. There was something in that gaze, an intensity that made Emily believe that yes, it was him, the calf she had saved, now grown strong and majestic. A tear rolled down her face as she extended her hand over the fence. To her surprise, the buffalo approached and allowed her to touch its muzzle. "I'm leaving tomorrow," she said, feeling foolish for talking to an animal, but unable to contain the words. "I'm going to study to help animals like you." The buffalo emitted a deep sound, almost like a response. They stayed like that for a few minutes in that silent communication that transcended words. When she finally moved away, Emily felt her heart lighter. It was as if she had received a blessing. Denver was exactly as her father had described, fast-paced, noisy, chaotic. In the first few months, homesickness hurt like a thorn under her skin. The small apartment she shared with 2 other students didn't have the smell of homemade bread or the sound of birds at dawn. Cars honked incessantly, and people walked hurriedly, with no time for good morning or smiles at corners. "Sometimes, I wonder if I made the right choice," she confessed to Clara, her roommate, after a particularly exhausting day of classes. "Everyone feels that way at first," replied Clara, adjusting her glasses. "It's like a country animal being released into the concrete jungle." The comparison made Emily laugh, but there was truth in those words. She was like an animal out of its habitat, trying to adapt. However, as the semesters advanced, her doubts diminished. The fascination with her studies, the discovery of the animal body in its complexity, the practical classes where she could put her hands on the animals, all of this confirmed she was on the right path. In her 3rd year of college, she got an internship at a veterinary clinic specializing in large animals. Dr. Henry, the clinic owner, quickly noticed her special ability. "It's impressive how animals calm down when you approach," he commented after observing her soothe an agitated horse with just her presence and soft voice. That's not taught in classrooms. Either you're born with it, or you're not. I grew up surrounded by animals, replied Emily, modestly. I guess I learned their language early on. What she didn't tell him was about the buffalo, about that connection she still felt like an anchor linking her to her roots. Some stories were too intimate to share, even with people she admired. Visits to Hope Springs became rarer as time passed. College demanded total dedication, and weekends were often occupied with shifts at the clinic. Charles and Betty understood, although they felt their daughter's absence like an empty room in a house that once overflowed with life. When she returned, Emily always performed the same ritual. After hugging her parents and catching up, she would walk to the boundary of the Marshall Ranch. The buffalo didn't always appear, but when it did, it was as if no time had passed. Those silent encounters fed her soul in a way she couldn't explain. At graduation, her parents were in the front row, eyes moist with pride. Mrs. Marlene, Mr. Jeremy, and other residents of Hope Springs made a point of going to the capital to see the girl who had grown up among them earn her degree. Emily, dressed in her black gown and cap, felt divided between two worlds, the simplicity of her hometown and the infinite possibilities that her career opened before her. Dr. Emily Wilson, murmured Charles, hugging his daughter after the ceremony. Who would have thought that the little girl who brought injured birds home would become an animal doctor? I always knew, replied Betty, wiping away a tear, ever since I saw her cradling the neighbor's kitten as if it were a doll. The celebration night was perfect, but the next day an unexpected proposal would change the course of Emily's plans. Dr. Henry called her for a private conversation. I want you to stay at the clinic as a full-time veterinarian, he said, without beating around the bush. Your talent is rare, and I have plans to expand to a wildlife rehabilitation farm. I need someone with your gift. The offer was tempting. It meant staying in Denver, consolidating a promising career working with what she loved. Still, as she accepted with a firm handshake, Emily felt a pang in her chest. As if something inside her knew that the longer she stayed away from her roots, the harder the eventual return would be. And for some reason she didn't fully understand, she felt that this return was inevitable, as if an invisible thread slowly pulled her back to Hope Springs. I accept, Dr. Henry. Let's make history together. What Emily didn't imagine was that her destiny was already traced in ways that not even the most experienced fortune-teller in Hope Springs could predict. And that, very soon, that invisible thread would pull with enough force to change everything. Again. Dr. Henry's veterinary clinic, located in a wooded area of Denver, became Emily's second home. In the 3 years following her graduation, she built a solid reputation among clients and colleagues. It wasn't just her technical competence that impressed, but that almost mystical ability to calm the most aggressive animals, to identify pains that other veterinarians took time to diagnose. It's like she reads their minds, a client once commented, after observing Emily treat a purebred horse that refused any approach from other professionals. I don't read minds, Emily explained, smiling while caressing the animal's neck. I just pay attention to the signals they give us all the time. Life in the capital followed a constant rhythm, predictable in its unpredictability. Monday to Friday at the clinic, occasional weekend shifts, and the rest of the time divided between specialization courses and the small circle of friends she had formed. She was comfortable, established, and weekly phone calls to her parents in Hope Springs helped diminish homesickness. It was during one of these calls that she noticed a subtle change in her father's voice. "Is everything okay there, Dad?" she asked, feeling that intuition that never failed. "Everything's great, honey," replied Charles with a slight cough he tried to disguise. "Just this dry weather that's been bothering me a little." Emily made a mental note to ask more about this in the next call. Her father had always been as healthy as a bull, rarely even catching a common cold. That cough, apparently trivial, lit a silent alert inside her. On a particularly sunny Saturday morning, Dr. Henry surprised the team with an important announcement during the weekly meeting. "We finally got approval for the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center," he said, his eyes shining with excitement. a 20-acre property on the outskirts of the city with facilities for treatment and rehabilitation of native species. The team celebrated enthusiastically. It was a project that had been discussed for years, a dream that was finally taking concrete form. When the meeting ended, Henry called Emily to his office. "I want you to be the technical director of the center," he said without beating around the bush. "No one has your talent with animals, and we need that to make the project take off." The Army proposal was irrefusable. It meant a leap in her career, more responsibility, more recognition. Emily accepted immediately, feeling a wave of gratitude for the mentor who had always believed in her. "You won't regret it, Dr. Henry. I'll give my best." "I know you will," he smiled. "And please, after all these years, I think you can just call me Henry." There was something in his gaze, a softness that went beyond the professional relationship. Emily realized, not for the first time, that her feelings for her boss were ambiguous. Admiration, certainly. Friendship, without doubt. But there was something more there, something she had never fully explored. In the following weeks, Emily immersed herself in planning the center. Entire days visiting the property, nights bent over plans and projects, meetings with biologists and specialists in native fauna. The work was exhausting but immensely satisfying. For the first time since leaving Hope Springs, she felt she was really building something significant, something that would leave a legacy. On one of those nights of intense work, Henry appeared, at her office with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. "We need to celebrate the small victories," he said, filling the glasses. "We got approval from the Wildlife Service for the rehabilitation protocol." They talked for hours, the wine untying knots of formality that still existed between them. Henry told her about his difficult divorce 5 years earlier, about his daughter who studied abroad, about old dreams he had tucked away in the back of a drawer. Emily talked about Hope Springs, her parents, the special connection she had with animals since childhood. "You never told me about your love life," he commented when the second glass was already half empty. "A woman like you, intelligent, beautiful, must have left a trail of broken hearts." Emily laughed, shaking her head. "Nothing so dramatic. A few boyfriends in college, nothing that lasted. I always put my career first." When their gazes met, over the rims of their glasses, something changed in the air between them, a silence laden with possibilities, paths that could be taken or avoided. It was Henry who approached first, gently touching her face. "Maybe it's time to rethink those priorities," he murmured, before kissing her. The kiss was soft, hesitant, like a delicate question. Emily felt her heart race, torn between responding to that gesture or backing away. She opted for the middle ground, neither deepening the kiss nor immediately pulling away. When they finally separated, Henry smiled, without embarrassment. "Sorry if I crossed any line," he said, "but I don't regret it." "Neither do I," replied Emily honestly. "I just think we need to take it slow. We work together and this project is too important for both of us." They agreed to let things flow naturally, without pressure. In the days that followed, they exchanged knowing glances during meetings, smiles that carried shared secrets. It was a delicious game of possibilities, a budding romance that both savored slowly. It was in this elevated state of mind that Emily received the phone call that would change everything. It was almost midnight on a Wednesday, and she had just arrived home after a long day at the center, which was beginning to take physical form with the first constructions. "Honey," Betty's voice sounded choked, distant, as if coming from another world. "Your father, he had a stroke. He's in the municipal hospital." The world seemed to stop. Emily felt the ground disappear beneath her feet, the room spinning around her. She clung to the phone as if it were a lifeline. "How is he?" she asked, her voice barely coming out. "Stable, but—" Betty hesitated, and Emily could hear the contained crying. "The doctors say it was serious. He's not responding as he should." Without thinking twice, Emily began packing while still on the phone. Clothes thrown anyhow into the suitcase, documents, the stethoscope she always carried. She called Henry next, explaining the situation in broken sentences. "I'll be away for an indefinite time," she concluded, her voice trembling. "I need to be with my family now." "Of course, Emily, do what you need to. We'll be here when you return." His voice was calm, comforting. "Do you want me to take you to the bus station?" "No need. I already called a taxi." "Thank you, Henry, for everything." At the bus station, while waiting for the night bus to Hope Springs, Emily felt the weight of distance like never before. 6 hours of travel seemed like an eternity. Every mile that separated her from home was like an impossible abyss to cross. Why had she stayed away for so long? Why had she let weekly phone calls turn into bi-weekly, sometimes monthly? Guilt consumed her, along with the fear of not arriving in time. When the bus finally departed, cutting through the dark night toward the interior of the state, Emily rested her forehead against the cold window glass. Outside, the urban landscape gradually gave way to fields and farms, and somewhere ahead, beyond the hills that were beginning to appear on the horizon line, was Hope Springs, the place that, despite everything, she still considered her true home. And along with that certainty came the sensation that once more she was being pulled by that invisible thread, guided by forces she didn't fully understand. As if all the time in Denver had been just a detour, a postponement of the destiny that awaited her in her hometown. The bus arrived in Hope Springs in the early hours of the morning. Emily awoke with the jolt of braking at the renovated bus station, the first of many surprises that awaited her. Where there had once been only a simple stop with a zinc roof, now stood a small station with a waiting room and a snack bar. Progress had reached her hometown while she built a life elsewhere. Uncle Gerald, her father's brother, was waiting for her with deep circles under his eyes and a tired smile. They embraced in silence, words insufficient to express the turmoil of emotions. On the way to the hospital, Emily observed the streets with the eyes of both a foreigner and a native. The gazebo in the square, now restored with vibrant colors, the new shopping center at the entrance to town, the family grocery store managed by Cousin Joe since her father had fallen ill months before, a detail Charles had never mentioned in their phone calls. "Why didn't he tell me?" she asked Gerald, her voice choked. "You know your father. He always thought he could get better on his own. Didn't want to worry you or interrupt your career," replied her uncle, maneuvering the car through the narrow streets that led to the municipal hospital. High blood pressure had been giving warning signs for over a year. St. Francis Municipal Hospital was another example of the changes, expanded with a new wing and modern equipment, the result of agreements with the state government, her uncle explained. However, none of this calmed Emily's heart when she finally entered the room where her father was hospitalized. Charles Wilson, once a strong man who carried heavy boxes in the grocery store without showing effort, now seemed diminished between the white sheets. Tubes and monitors surrounded him, and his face, normally expressive, was partially paralyzed on the right side. Betty, seated beside the bed, held his hand as if it were a fragile treasure. "Mom," whispered Emily, feeling tears escape without control. Betty jumped up and hugged her daughter with unexpected strength for her small body, smelling of coffee and lavender perfume, as always. Some things, thankfully, remained unchanged. "He'll be fine now that you're here," murmured her mother in her ear, with a conviction that swung between faith and desperation. Emily approached the bed, instinctively analyzing her father's vital signs on the monitors with professional eyes. Behind the oxygen mask, Charles's eyes lit up when he recognized her. He tried to speak, but only incoherent sounds came out. The frustration in his gaze was palpable. "You don't need to say anything, Dad," she said, holding his hand carefully. Avoiding the IV access. "I'm here now. We'll take care of you." Dr. Phillip, a neurologist recently arrived in town, explained the situation with technical terms that Emily understood perfectly. The cerebrovascular accident had affected the motor area on the left side of the brain, causing paralysis on the right side of the body and aphasia, difficulty in speaking. Recovery would be slow, requiring intensive physical therapy, speech therapy, and much time. With proper treatment, we can expect a partial recovery, perhaps even significant, the doctor concluded, but we need to be realistic about the limitations. Emily. thanked him for his honesty. As a healthcare professional, she knew that vague diagnoses or unfounded hopes didn't help anyone. In the days that followed, she established a routine. Mornings at the hospital with her father, afternoons helping her mother at the grocery store, or organizing paperwork for health insurance and treatments, evenings studying about neurological rehabilitation in post-stroke patients. She slept little, ate poorly, and called Henry almost daily for updates about the rehabilitation center. "You need to rest a bit," Henry insisted during one of these calls, concern evident in his voice. "It won't help your father if you end up getting sick too." "I'm fine," she lied while massaging her temples to relieve another headache. "I just need to find a good physical therapist here. The options are limited." It was Mrs. Elaine, the same regular customer at the grocery store, who years before had commented on her gift with animals, who suggested an unexpected solution during a courtesy visit. "Why don't you take care of your father yourself?" asked the lady, savoring a piece of cornbread in the Wilsons' kitchen. "You understand bodies, recovery. The principles aren't so different." The idea, although unorthodox, made a strange kind of sense to Emily. She began adapting animal, physical therapy techniques for her father's needs, complementing the work of the town's only physical therapist, who came only twice a week. Charles responded surprisingly well, as if his daughter's touch carried something beyond technique, that same energy that calmed frightened horses and healed injured birds. As weeks turned into months, Emily reconnected with the town and its inhabitants. Solidarity visits brought news, stories from the years she had been absent. She learned that the Marshall Ranch had modernized, expanding production of buffalo milk products, that the mayor's daughter had become a singer and appeared on television, that the old little church would be registered as a historical landmark. On a particularly hot afternoon, after an exercise session with her father that left both exhausted but smiling at the progress, Emily decided to walk to the boundary of the Marshall Ranch. She needed that moment of reconnection, of remembering who she was and where she came from. The trail was still there, although wider and better maintained. The sunset was painting the sky with orange tones when she spotted the fence, now replaced by a modern structure of wire and treated wood. She leaned against one of the posts, breathing in the familiar country air, letting childhood memories wash her tired soul. It was then that she saw him. Majestic, imposing, with horns that seemed carved in ebony and eyes that carried ancient wisdom. The buffalo, her buffalo, approached the fence with deliberately slow steps. Emily felt her heart race. There was no doubt. Those eyes recognized her even after so many years. "Hello, old friend," she whispered, extending her hand over the fence. The animal snorted softly, approaching until its muzzle touched her extended palm. The contact sent an electric current through Emily's body, that same sensation she had experienced as a child when reuniting the calf with its mother, a connection that transcended species, time, distance. "Who would have thought you'd still remember me?" "Animals have better memories than many people," said a deep voice behind her, making her start. Turning quickly, Emily found herself face to face with a tall man with a graying beard and sun-tanned skin. He wore simple work clothes, muddy boots, and a worn straw hat that partially shaded his penetrating green eyes. "Mr. Marshall," she asked, recognizing the farm owner from descriptions heard throughout her life. "Jack Marshall," he confirmed, with a slight nod. "And you must be the Wilsons' daughter, the animal girl, as they used to say." "Emily," she extended her hand, which he shook firmly. His hands were rough, marked by decades of hard work, but his touch was surprisingly gentle. "Sorry if I'm trespassing on your property. The fence is just to keep the animals in, not people out," he replied, with a half-smile that softened his severe features. "Besides, he seems to like you," he added, indicating the buffalo with a nod. Emily turned her gaze back to the animal, which remained close, observing the interaction with evident curiosity. "His name is Thunder," continued Jack. "He's been the herd leader for years. Strong, intelligent, and surprisingly gentle with the calves." Something in the way the farmer talked about the animals touched Emily. It wasn't the pragmatic and distant tone she expected from a breeder, but words laden with respect and genuine affection. "You two seem to have a history," commented Jack, studying the interaction between her and the buffalo. Emily briefly told him about rescuing the calf years ago. As she spoke, she observed the man's face transform, the reserved expression giving way to one of understanding and something more that she couldn't immediately identify. "So it was you," he murmured when she finished. "I always wondered how that calf had survived. His mother died the next day, complications from childbirth. I thought he wouldn't last without her, but he strengthened in a way I never completely understood." A comfortable silence established itself between them, filled only by the sound of wind in the tree leaves and the occasional distant lowing of the herd. The sun had already set, leaving the sky in a gradient of deep blues. "It's getting late," observed Jack. "Would you like a ride back to town? My truck is just over there." Emily hesitated for just an instant. There was something about this man, a comforting solidity, a presence that inspired immediate trust. She accepted the invitation with a nod. Before leaving, she touched Thunder's muzzle one last time, feeling that this reunion marked something important, although she didn't yet know exactly what. On the way back, they talked about the town, about the changes of recent years, about Charles's health status. Jack listened with genuine attention, asking pertinent questions about the treatment. When she mentioned her adaptations of veterinary techniques for her father's physical therapy, he seemed especially interested. "Nature has its own wisdom," he commented. "Sometimes the boundaries we create between species are more artificial than we imagine." As they said goodbye in front of the Wilson home, Jack hesitated, as if wanting to say something more. In the end, he limited himself to a simple "see you soon," which sounded more like a promise than a casual farewell. That night, lying in her old bed, Emily revisited the encounter in her mind. The buffalo, Jack, the strange sensation of being exactly where she was supposed to be. She picked up her phone to call Henry, as she did every night, but hesitated with her finger over the call button. For the first time since she had returned, she didn't feel that urgency to connect with Denver, with the life she had put on pause. Instead, she fell asleep to the familiar sound of crickets in the backyard, dreaming of deep eyes that seemed to see into her soul, only she wasn't sure if they were Thunder's eyes or those of his mysterious owner. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit like. Tell us what city you're watching from. We'll continue. The following weeks brought a new routine for Emily. The days at the hospital, caring for her father who was slowly regaining words and movements, alternated with afternoons at the grocery store helping her mother. But now, almost daily, she made a visit to the boundary of the Marshall Ranch. Sometimes she found only Thunder, other times Jack himself appeared, as if guessing her presence. Conversations with the rancher gradually deepened. Emily discovered that, behind that rustic and reserved appearance, hid a sharp mind and a sensitive heart. Jack had studied animal science in the capital, but abandoned his academic career after his wife's departure, who couldn't bear the isolation of rural life. Maria was from the big city, used to cinemas, restaurants, and bustle, he explained. One afternoon, as they walked along the bank of a creek that cut through the property, she tried to adapt for 3 years, but in the end, the loneliness was stronger. She left a note and returned to San Francisco. "I'm sorry," said Emily, touched by the frankness with which he shared his pain. "It's been 20 years. It hurts." "Less now," he replied with a melancholy smile. "The animals helped. They don't judge, don't abandon, they just exist in their complex simplicity." It was precisely this understanding of animals that created an invisible bridge between them. On a particularly cold morning, Jack invited Emily to see the rest of the ranch. They rode on horseback and traveled through the vast fields where the buffalo grazed freely. "Why buffalo?" she asked while observing a group of females with their calves. "My grandfather started with some specimens brought from Italy, half out of stubbornness, half out of vision," explained Jack. "When I inherited the ranch, I realized the potential. They're resistant animals, adaptable, and the milk has unique properties. Less known than traditional cattle, but infinitely more interesting." As the sun rose in the sky, they reached a more remote part of the property. A stone and wood construction stood among ancient trees, the ranch's original old house, now restored and transformed into something that left Emily speechless. "A hospital for wild animals?" she asked, incredulous, as they toured the impeccable facilities. "Rehabilitation center," corrected Jack with evident pride. "It started as a hobby, to help injured animals I found on the property. It grew over time. The facilities rivaled many urban centers, cages adapted for different species, treatment rooms with modern equipment, even a small laboratory. Currently, it housed 3 baby alligators rescued from hunters, a mountain lion recovering after being hit by a car, and various birds of prey." "How do you keep all this running?" asked Emily, impressed with the organization. "I have a partnership with the State University. We receive interns periodically, and Professor Alistair from the veterinary department comes twice a month," he explained. "Additionally, part of the profits from buffalo cheese and dairy production finances the project." While examining a blue macaw with a broken wing, Jack carefully observed Emily's precise movements, the way the bird instantly calmed at her touch. "You have a rare gift," he commented. "It's a shame to waste it just on pets in the big city." Emily felt the weight of that observation. In recent days, Henry had been calling frequently, asking about her return, talking about deadlines, commitments, about the rehabilitation center that was beginning to function without her. His calls, once anxiously awaited, now brought a strange feeling of pressure. "I don't know anymore if I want to go back," she confessed, surprising herself with that admission out loud. Jack showed no surprise. He just nodded, as if already expecting those words. "The big city takes something from us that nature gives back," he said simply. "But it's a decision only you can make." On the way back to the ranch headquarters, they rode in comfortable silence. The afternoon sun gilded the fields, and the breeze brought the smell of wet earth and fresh grass. On an impulse, Emily spurred her horse, launching into a sudden gallop. She felt adrenaline course through her veins, the wind on her face, the pure freedom of that moment. Jack soon caught up with her, and for a few magical minutes they ran side by side, laughing like children. When they finally stopped, breathless and smiling, something had changed between them. A new tension, electric, pulsed in the air. Emily dismounted, feeling her legs trembling not just from the effort of the gallop. Jack approached, holding the reins of both horses with one hand, while the other gently touched her face. "Emily," he began, his voice husky with contained emotion. The moment was interrupted by the strident ring of her cell phone. On the screen, Henry's name blinked insistently. Emily hesitated, divided between 2 worlds, 2 possibilities of future that bifurcated before her eyes. "I need to answer," she said, stepping back a few paces. The conversation was brief and tense. The center was facing problems with licensing. Emily's replacement had given up, and Henry sounded increasingly impatient with her prolonged absence. "I need a definitive answer, Emily," he said, his voice mixing professional and personal frustration. "I can't keep your position indefinitely. Other people depend on these decisions." "I understand, Henry. I'll think about it and give you an answer soon," she replied, feeling the weight of that imminent decision. When she hung up, she found Jack giving water to the horses, his face carefully neutral, as if trying not to influence her choice. The return to town was silent, each immersed in their own thoughts. At the door of the Wilson home, they said goodbye with the promise of a new meeting the next day. But before leaving, Jack held her hand a little longer than necessary. "Whatever your decision, I want you to know there's room for your dreams here too," he said, with an intensity that made her heart leap. "The rehabilitation center needs someone like you. I need someone like you." That night, while helping her father with rehabilitation exercises, Emily had a divided mind. Charles, now able to form simple sentences, noticed her distraction. "Something worries you?" he asked, with the evident effort of each word. Emily hesitated but decided to share her dilemma. She spoke of Denver, the center, of Henry. She spoke of the Marshall Ranch, the wildlife rehabilitation center, of Jack. She spoke of Thunder the buffalo and the inexplicable connection she felt with that place, with those people, with those animals. Charles listened attentively, his eyes shining with understanding and love. When she finished, he made a visible effort to speak more clearly. "Your place is where your heart breathes," he said, pausingly. The profound simplicity of those words hit Emily like a revelation. Before she could respond, Betty entered the room, her face pale and hands trembling, holding a crumpled paper. "I just found this organizing your father's old documents," she said, extending the paper to Emily. "I think you need to see this." It was an old birth certificate yellowed by time. Emily examined it, confused. The document recorded the birth of a child named Emily, but not Emily Wilson. The surname was different, Emily Marshall. "Mom, what is this?" she asked, feeling her heart race. Betty exchanged a look with Charles, who nodded slightly as if giving permission for a long-delayed revelation. "You're not our biological daughter, Emily," said Betty with a trembling voice. "You're the daughter of Jack Marshall and Maria Henderson. When she left the ranch, she abandoned you too. You were only 6 months old." The revelation fell like lightning, instantly rearranging the entire puzzle of her existence. The pieces fit together with painful clarity. The inexplicable connection with the ranch, Jack's look when he observed her, even her affinity with the buffalo. Everything made sense now, in a way that was both cruel and liberating at the same time. "Does Jack know this?" she managed to ask, while tears blurred her vision. "No," replied Betty, holding her hand tightly. "Maria left you with us before she left. He thinks she took you to San Francisco. When we lost contact with her years later, we never had the courage to tell the truth." Charles, with visible effort, extended his trembling hand to touch his daughter's face. "Always our daughter," he said, his eyes moist. "Doesn't matter. Blood." Emily hugged her adoptive parents tightly, her heart overflowing with love and gratitude. It was they who had cared for her, loved her, formed the person she was today. Nothing would change that. But now a new dimension opened in her story, an unknown chapter that needed to be explored. "I need to talk to him," she said, wiping away tears. "He deserves to know the truth." Betty nodded, understanding the inevitability of that meeting. "We have a letter that Maria left for you, in case you ever discovered the truth," she said, opening a drawer in the dresser and removing a sealed envelope. "I think the time has come for you to read it." That night, alone in her childhood bedroom, Emily opened with trembling fingers the envelope containing the words of a mother she never knew. Each word seemed a whisper from the past, a bridge to an uncertain future she now needed to face. Tomorrow she would seek out Jack. Tomorrow she would reveal the truth that could either unite or further separate the complex threads of her destiny. Morning arrived with a cruel clarity after a night practically without sleep. Emily watched the sunrise from her window, the words of Maria Henderson's letter still echoing in her mind. Painful phrases that tried to explain the inexplicable, a mother abandoning her daughter because she couldn't bear the weight of motherhood, because she felt suffocated by rural life, because she believed the child would be better off with Charles and Betty than with her. "Don't blame Jack," said a particularly painful passage. "He never knew I left you behind. I told him I would take you with me to San Francisco, but I didn't have the courage. I knew he would never let me leave with you, and I also knew I couldn't be the mother you deserved. It was cowardice, I know that now, but at the time it seemed the only possible way out." Breakfast was silent. The looks between Emily and her adoptive parents carried 2 decades of secrets finally revealed. There was no anger, just a sadness mixed with apprehension for what would come next. "I'm going to talk to him today," Emily finally said, breaking the heavy silence. "Do you want us to go with you?" asked Betty, nervously squeezing the napkin between her fingers. Emily shook her head. "This is something I need to do alone. You've already carried this secret for too long." Before leaving, she hugged them both for a long time. No matter what happened from here on out, these were her parents, the ones who had held her hand in her first steps, who had celebrated every achievement, who had shaped her character with love and example. No revelation would change that. The path to the Marshall Ranch never seemed so long. Each step was accompanied by anxiety and doubts. How would Jack react? Anger, disbelief, joy, rejection. The possibilities were endless and equally terrifying. Upon reaching the limits of the property, she was greeted by Thunder, who approached the fence as if expecting her. Emily extended her hand to touch the buffalo's muzzle, seeking comfort in that connection she now understood better. It wasn't just her natural affinity with animals, but also the martial blood that ran in her veins. "I need to see your owner," she whispered to the buffalo. "Will you give me courage?" As if understanding, Thunder emitted a deep and calm sound. Emily took a deep breath and followed the main road of the ranch to the headquarters, an imposing stone and wood construction that she now saw with new eyes, the house where she should have grown up, where perhaps there was still a place for her. Jack was on the porch, apparently fixing an old saddle. Seeing her approach, his face lit up with that smile that now had a completely new meaning. "Emily, I wasn't expecting you so early," he said, rising to greet her. Something in her expression must have revealed the inner storm, for Jack's smile quickly gave way to concern. "Did something happen? Is your father worse?" Emily swallowed hard, the words rehearsed during the entire night suddenly stuck in her throat. "Can we talk somewhere more private?" she finally managed to say. He nodded, leading her inside the house. The living room was welcoming, with rustic furniture and old photographs on the walls. Emily stopped in front of one in particular, a young woman with dark hair and expressive eyes, embraced by a younger Jack. Both smiled at the camera, frozen, in a moment of happiness that seemed to belong to another life. "Maria Henderson," said Jack, noticing her interest in the photograph. "My wife. You look a bit like her, you know?" The comment, made naturally, was like a knife to Emily's heart. The moment had arrived. "It's not a coincidence," she said, turning to face him. Her hands trembled so much that she needed to clasp them together tightly. "Jack, what I'm going to say will change everything, and I ask that you listen to me until the end." Confused, he indicated that they should sit. The next few minutes were the most difficult of Emily's life. Word by word, she unraveled the story she had just discovered. Maria's abandonment, the decision to leave her with the Wilsons, the lie that had endured for more than 2 decades. As she spoke, she watched Jack's face transform. First incredulity, then shock, then a pain so deep it seemed physical. When she finally finished, showing the birth certificate and the letter, a heavy silence fell over them. Jack rose abruptly, walking to the window. His back, rigid under the checkered shirt, trembled slightly. For long minutes, he remained like that, looking at the horizon while Emily waited, her heart pounding, not knowing what to expect. When he finally turned. His face was marked by tears, a strong and reserved man exposing his vulnerability without reservation. 23 years, he said, his voice hoarse. 23 years looking for you. I hired detectives, scoured all of San Francisco, placed ads in newspapers. I thought you were dead, that something terrible had happened. And you were here. So close, all this time. Emily felt her own tears overflow. I never knew. I grew up believing Charles and Betty were my biological parents. I only found out last night. Jack approached, hesitant, as if fearing she might disappear at any moment. With trembling hands, he touched her face, examining every detail as if seeking confirmation of what he already knew in his heart. Your eyes, he murmured. They're the same as my mother's. And that stubborn chin. It's just like mine. How did I not notice before? Maybe we weren't ready to see, she replied, feeling strangely calm now that the truth was exposed. In a sudden movement, Jack enveloped her in a tight embrace, as if wanting to recover all the hugs lost in 2 decades. Emily smelled the scent of earth, sun, and coffee that emanated from him, scents that she now recognized as part of a heritage she never knew she possessed. When they finally separated, Jack's expression had changed. Through the tears, a smile was beginning to form. My daughter, he said, testing the words as if they were a rare wine. My daughter has come home. I'm still trying to understand what this means, confessed Emily. I love Charles and Betty. They are my parents in every way that matters. And they always will be, assured Jack, with a generosity that surprised them both. They cared for you, transformed you into the incredible woman you are today. My gratitude to them is eternal. But if you'll allow it, I would like to get to know my daughter, recover a bit of the time we've lost." The following hours passed like a dream. They walked through the ranch while Jack showed Emily her heritage, lands that would one day be hers, stories of ancestors who shared her blood, family traditions that now also belonged to her. They stopped by a crystal-clear lake at the back of the property. The afternoon sun created golden reflections on the water, while a comfortable silence established itself between father and daughter, words that still sounded strange but were beginning to make sense. "When you were a baby, I used to bring you here on Sunday mornings," Jack told her, looking at the horizon. "You would laugh at the wild ducks, stretch out your little hands trying to reach the butterflies. I thought I had lost those memories forever." "Tell me more about that time," asked Emily, thirsty for fragments of a story she never knew. Jack smiled, his eyes lost in distant memories. "You were a calm baby, observant. You seemed to understand the animals even then. When you cried, you would only calm down if I took you to see the buffalo." He laughed. "Maria thought it was strange, but I knew you were special. The blood of the Marshalls has always had this connection with the land, with the animals." Emily's cell phone rang, interrupting the moment. It was Betty, worried about her delay. "Everything's fine, Mom," said Emily, observing Jack's expression as he heard her call another woman mother. There was no resentment, only understanding. "I'm with my father. I'm going to stay a bit longer." "Tell them to come have dinner here tonight," whispered Jack. All three. Emily relayed the invitation, which was accepted after a moment of hesitation. When she hung up, Jack was watching her with a thoughtful expression. "This is strange for all of us," he said, "but I think we can build something new, not to replace what you had with them, but to complement it. Like an extended family," suggested Emily, trying to imagine what this unusual arrangement would be like. "Exactly. After all, the more love, the better." Walking back to the ranch house, they passed by the rehabilitation center. Jack hesitated at the entrance, as if he had just had an idea. "Before we continue talking about the past, I want to talk about the future," he said, opening the center's door. "This place has always been my pride, but I always knew something was missing. Now I understand what, or rather who." Emily immediately understood what he was suggesting. "Are you offering me a job?" "I'm offering a partnership," he corrected. "Your training, your experience, your natural gift, everything that's missing to transform this place into something truly special. We could expand, create an environmental education program, work with the university, in a more structured way." The proposal fell like a perfect piece in the puzzle that Emily had been trying to assemble in her mind. An opportunity to use her knowledge, to be close to her adoptive parents, to get to know her biological father, to finally belong completely somewhere. "And what do you think?" asked Jack, anxious at her silence. "I think I need to make a call." "To Denver," she replied, with a smile that made her decision clear. The conversation with Henry was difficult as expected. There was incomprehension, then veiled anger, finally reluctant acceptance. When she mentioned the rehabilitation center at the Marshall Ranch, she felt the surprise on the other end of the line. "So you found your place," he said, his voice softer now. "In a way, I always knew you belonged more to the countryside than to the city." "Thank you for understanding, Henry." "I didn't say I understand, just that I respect your choice," he corrected. "And what about us?" The question hung in the air, laden with unconcretized possibilities. Emily looked out the window, where Jack was feeding some birds in recovery, the open landscape, the infinite sky of her state, the feeling of finally being where she should be. "I think we were always more of a possibility than a reality, weren't we?" she responded gently. The silence on the other end confirmed her words. They said goodbye with vague promises to keep in touch, knowing that life would take them on increasingly distant paths. That night, dinner at the ranch house began tensely, with Charles in his wheelchair, carefully observing the man who shared his adoptive daughter's blood. Betty avoided looking directly at Jack, as if fearing to find accusations in his eyes. But gradually the home-cooked food, the local wine, and mainly Emily's evident joy, began breaking down the barriers. "You gave her everything I couldn't," said Jack, raising his glass in a toast. "You made her the wonderful person she is today. I can never thank you enough." "We did what any fatheress would do," replied Charles, the effort to articulate the words demonstrating the importance he gave to that recognition. Betty, finally relaxing, shared stories of Emily's childhood, her first words, her mischief, her school achievements. Jack listened with eager attention, collecting fragments of a life he didn't witness, but now tried to understand. When the night advanced, and the time for goodbyes came, Emily accompanied her adoptive parents to the car. She hugged them for a long time, a lump in her throat thinking of all the layers of love and sacrifice that family represented. "This doesn't change anything between us," she assured them. "You will always be my parents." "We know that, sweetie," replied Betty, caressing her face. "But now you have the chance to know the other part of who you are. It's fair. It's right." On the porch of the ranch house, watching the car move away down the dirt road, Emily felt Jack approach and place a protective arm around her shoulders. "Family is more than blood," he said, as if reading her thoughts. "It's choice, it's commitment, it's daily love." "I think I'm very lucky," she replied, leaning slightly against him. "Some people spend their whole lives looking for a place to belong. I found two." That night, before sleeping in the room that had been hastily prepared for her, a room that, as Jack had explained emotionally, was next to what would have been her baby room, Emily went to the window. Outside, under the moonlight, the buffalo rested peacefully in the pastures. Among them, she recognized Thunder's imposing silhouette. And then, like a revelation, she understood why the animal had recognized her after so many years. It wasn't just the rescue of the calf. It was something deeper, an instinctive recognition that transcended rational explanations. The buffalo had sensed in her the martial blood, the connection with the land that was her heritage. Some bonds, she realized, were too strong to be broken by time or distance. With that certainty in her heart, Emily fell asleep, dreaming of alternative pasts and promising futures, all intertwined by the invisible thread of destiny that had finally brought her home. The following months unfolded in a new rhythm, like a river finding another bed after an unexpected flood. Charles's recovery progressed slowly, clearer words, hesitant steps supported by a cane, more frequent smiles. Emily divided her time between her adoptive parents' house, where she supervised physical therapy and helped with her father's readaptation, and the Marshall Ranch, where the rehabilitation center flourished under her technical coordination. The news that Emily Wilson was in fact Emily Marshall spread quickly through Hope Springs. Reactions were diverse. Some expressed surprise, others pretended they had always suspected the resemblance, and there were those who wove conspiracy theories about the unusual family arrangement. But the small town soon got used to the idea, especially when they saw how harmoniously the new family configuration worked. "I like to think I gained a family, not that I lost one," explained Emily to Mrs. Elaine, when the lady expressed her confusion about to whom Emily belonged now. "It's like having 2 Christmases and 2 birthdays," joked the old lady, finally understanding. The rehabilitation center project grew faster than anyone could have predicted. Emily's expertise, combined with Jack's resources and vision, transformed the place into a regional reference. Universities from neighboring states sent students for internships. The Wildlife Service began referring rescued animals. A report in a state newspaper brought visibility and support from environmentalists. "I always knew this place had potential," commented Jack one afternoon, as they watched the release of a gray wolf recovered from severe burns. "It just lacked the final piece of the puzzle." Emily smiled, recognizing in his words not just the professional compliment, but also the joy of a father who could finally share his passion with his daughter. The relationship between them had evolved into something unique, a mixture of professional partnership and mutual discovery, punctuated by moments of recognition of surprising similarities. "You frown exactly like I do when you're concentrating," he observed once, while Emily examined X-rays of a jaguar. "And you have the same habit I do of drumming your fingers when you're impatient." she retorted, noticing the habit she had always believed was just hers. They were small discoveries that built bridges over the abyss of 23 years of absence. They didn't fill the void, but created new shared territories. On a particularly busy morning, Jack entered the improvised office where Emily was treating a baby anteater. His face wore an expression she had already learned to recognize, the mixture of excitement and concern that indicated some unusual challenge. "We received a call from the wildlife police," he said without preamble. "They apprehended a group of wildlife traffickers at the state border. Among the rescued animals, there's a pregnant buffalo in critical condition." Emily felt her heart race. Her specialty had always been wild animals, but buffalo occupied a special place in her life, a connection that went beyond professional training. "How long until they arrive?" "Less than an hour. They're bringing her directly here." The preparation was quick and efficient. They adapted the larger stable to receive the animal, separated medications, instruments, prepared for any emergency. When the wildlife police truck finally arrived, Emily was already at her post with gloves and apron. The scene she found inside the cargo compartment turned her stomach. The buffalo, a rare specimen with light-colored coat, was lying on dirty straw, her body too thin for an animal in advanced pregnancy. Open wounds on her flanks indicated mistreatment, and her eyes, although alive, revealed a silent suffering that spoke directly to Emily's heart. "Let's get her out carefully," she directed, naturally assuming command of the situation. "She's too weak to walk. We need a stretcher." With help from Jack and 2 officers, they managed to transfer the animal to the prepared stable. The buffalo emitted low moans, and her accelerated breathing worried Emily. "She's in labor," she diagnosed, after a quick examination, "probably induced by the stress of transport. The calf is malpositioned." In the hours that followed, Emily fought like never before for an animal's life. The combination of malnutrition, infected wounds, and complicated labor created a challenging scenario even for the most experienced veterinarian. Jack remained by her side the whole time, anticipating needs, offering silent support. "Come on, girl," Emily whispered to the buffalo while trying to reposition the calf. "You're strong, I know you can do it." At the critical moment when the buffalo's strength seemed to be completely exhausted, Emily had an unexpected idea. "Thunder," she said to Jack. "Bring Thunder here." "What?" he asked, confused. "Emily, it's risky to bring another buffalo now, especially a dominant male." "Trust me," she insisted, with that instinctive certainty that rarely betrayed her. "Something tells me it will help." Reluctantly, Jack followed her instructions. Minutes later, Thunder was led to the stable entrance. The imposing buffalo stopped, sniffing the air, his eyes fixed on the debilitated female. "Let him in," asked Emily. "Are you sure?" Jack hesitated, concerned about everyone's safety. "Absolutely." To the surprise of those present, Thunder calmly entered the stable and approached the buffalo. Instead of the expected territorial reaction, he emitted deep, almost melodious sounds that seemed to visibly calm the female. He positioned himself near her head, allowing her to smell him, to feel his strong and secure presence. The effect was almost immediate. The buffalo's breathing regularized, and when the next contraction came, she seemed to find renewed strength to push. Emily, taking advantage of the moment, finally managed to adjust the calf's position to facilitate birth. "That's it. We're almost there," she encouraged, feeling that the worst had passed. When the calf was finally born, a reverent silence took over the stable. It was a light-coated calf, like its mother, which seemed tiny and fragile compared to Thunder. Emily quickly cleaned its airways, smiled upon hearing the first sound of life, and helped it approach its mother for the first contact. "It's a miracle," whispered Jack, his voice choked with emotion. Both were on the brink of death when they arrived. "Some bonds are too strong to be broken," replied Emily, not taking her eyes off the scene before her, where the buffalo, even exhausted, was already beginning to clean the calf with instinctive movements of her rough tongue. The most surprising, however, was Thunder's reaction. The buffalo remained close, like a vigilant guardian, observing the new life that was emerging. At a certain point, He approached the newborn calf and carefully smelled it, as if recognizing it as part of his herd. "I've never seen anything like it," commented one of the assistants, amazed. "They're normally so territorial." "Family," said Jack simply, with a significant look at Emily. "Sometimes it transcends what we think we know about nature." It was already dawn when they finally left the stable, confident that mother and calf would survive. They walked in silence under a starry sky to the ranch house. Emily felt her body aching from the prolonged effort, but her spirit was light, as it always was, after a life saved. "What you did today was incredible," said Jack, when they stopped on the porch. "Not just the technique, but the intuition. How did you know thunder would help?" Emily hesitated, trying to find words to explain something that not even she fully understood. "It was as if I could feel what she needed. It wasn't just a medical procedure that was missing. It was presence, strength, security, and somehow I knew that thunder could offer that." Jack nodded without surprise. "My grandmother had that gift. She said she could hear the animals speak, not with words, but with something deeper. People from the city thought it was superstition, but here we understand that some knowledge comes from places that science hasn't yet reached." "An ancestral knowledge," murmured Emily, suddenly remembering that first connection with the buffalo calf so many years ago, as if it were in the blood. "In the Marshall blood," smiled Jack, with evident pride. That night marked a turning point in the relationship between father and daughter. Something indefinable had changed, a final barrier that dissolved like fog in the sun. They were no longer just two people trying to build bridges over an abyss of absence. They were, finally, family in the full sense of the word. The next morning, when visiting the buffalo and her calf, they found Betty already in the stable. She had brought a bucket of fresh water and was observing the animals with admiration. "The whole town is talking about the rescue," she explained, seeing Emily's surprise. "I thought I should see with my own eyes." When Jack moved away to check on other animals, Betty gently touched her daughter's arm. "He told me what you did, how you knew exactly what that poor creature needed." Her eyes shone with maternal pride. "I always knew you were special since you were little. Now I understand why." Emily hugged her adoptive mother, feeling a wave of gratitude for this woman who had always encouraged her to follow her intuition, even without completely understanding. "Tayo gave me the foundation to be who I am today. What I inherited from him only flourished because you cultivated the ground." The hug they shared sealed a mutual understanding that transcended words. Blood, upbringing, destiny, everything intertwined in a complex web that had resulted in the person Emily had become. In the days that followed, mother and calf became the stars of the rehabilitation center. The regional press appeared to document the case, and Emily, although reluctant in the spotlight, took the opportunity to talk about wildlife trafficking and conservation. The story of the veterinarian who had used a buffalo from the herd to help in the rescue captivated the public, and donations began to arrive for the center. "Fame can be useful when well directed," commented Jack, as they opened boxes with new equipment purchased with the donation money. "I never thought I'd be giving interviews on TV," laughed Emily. "I prefer the company of animals." "One more family characteristic," he smiled, winking with complicity. A week after the rescue, Emily received an unexpected call. It was Henry, her former boss and almost boyfriend from Denver. "I saw your interview on the regional news," he said, without beating around the bush. "I was impressed with the work you're doing there." "Thank you," replied Emily, feeling strangely distant from that life she had left behind. "The center is growing faster than we expected." "Actually, I called to propose a partnership," continued Henry. "Our center in the capital could establish a rehabilitation and release corridor with yours. We have complementary structures." The proposal was interesting from a technical point of view and would benefit the animals, the final goal of both centers. Even so, Emily felt an inexplicable chill, like a presentiment. "It sounds like a great idea," she said cautiously. "Can we discuss the details by email?" "I'd prefer in person. I was thinking of making a technical visit next week, if that's all right." Emily hesitated. The prospect of seeing Henry again brought contradictory feelings, but professionalism spoke louder. Of course, you'll be welcome. I'll prepare a complete presentation of our work. Upon hanging up, she found Jack at the door of her improvised office, his face registering a concern he tried to disguise. "Your friend from the big city is coming to visit us?" he asked, feigning casualness. "Just for work," Emily clarified, noticing the subtext of the question. "A partnership between the centers makes strategic sense." Jack nodded, visibly relieved. "Of course, you're the technical director. I trust your judgment." That night, having dinner with her adoptive parents, Emily commented about the call. Charles, now able to maintain longer conversations, expressed enthusiasm for the partnership. Betty, however, seemed reserved. "Henry was more than a boss to you, wasn't he?" she asked directly, with that maternal intuition that never failed. "He could have been," admitted Emily, "but that was before everything changed." Betty held her hand across the table, her eyes revealing deep understanding. "Just be careful, sweetie. Sometimes the past returns not to stay, but to test if we really belong to the present we've chosen." Her mother's words resonated in Emily's mind as she drove back to the ranch that night. The sky was extraordinarily starry, and the rural road, illuminated only by her car's headlights, seemed like a tunnel through time, connecting who she was now, and who she might become. Upon arriving at the ranch, instead of going directly to the main house, she parked near the pastures. Thunder, as if sensing her presence, approached the fence. Emily got out of the car and went to him, caressing his broad muzzle in the darkness. "What do you think?" she asked softly to the animal. "Does the past belong to the past?" Thunder snorted softly, as if responding in his own way. A buffalo didn't worry about yesterday or tomorrow. It existed fully in the now, connected to the earth, to the sky, to its herd. Perhaps there was wisdom in that. What Emily didn't know as she contemplated the stars beside her silent confidant was that Henry's visit would trigger a series of events that would test everything she had built in Hope Springs, and that her bond with Thunder would be tested in a way she could never have imagined. The week preceding Henry's visit passed in a whirlwind of preparations. Emily organized detailed presentations, recovery and release statistics, locally developed protocols. She wanted to impress him professionally, show that the rehabilitation center at the Marshall Ranch, although rural, was not behind urban institutions. "You're nervous," observed Jack, while helping her organize the documents the night before the visitor's arrival. "I just want everything to be perfect," replied Emily, checking once more the meticulously arranged folders. "It's more than that," insisted Jack, with that insight she had inherited. "It's as if you need to prove something." Emily stopped, taking a deep breath. Her biological father had developed an impressive ability to read her emotions, even those she tried to hide. "Maybe you're right," she admitted. "Henry was my mentor for years. In a way, I still seek his approval. And there's the other aspect too," added Jack delicately, "the personal one." "That's in the past," she assured, although a pang of doubt accompanied her words. The following morning dawned extraordinarily hot for that time of year. The sky, usually clear, showed dark clouds on the horizon, heralding one of the summer storms that usually swept through the region with brief but intense fury. "Strange weather," commented Emily upon waking, observing the sky through the window. The center had been prepared for the visit. The animals under treatment were clean and comfortable in their facilities. The team wore new uniforms with the recently designed logo, and even the buffalo in the main pasture had received extra attention, as they were part of what made the place special. Precisely at 10 in the morning, a luxury pickup truck parked in the main yard. Henry stepped out of the vehicle, impeccably dressed in attire that, although casual, betrayed his urban and sophisticated origin. Beside him, a young woman with short hair and an analytical gaze carried a tablet and a professional camera. "Emily," he exclaimed, opening his arms for a hug. "You look radiant. The countryside definitely suits you." The hug was brief and professional, but Emily couldn't help but notice the familiar perfume he wore, the same as always, which she had so often smelled during long work nights at the clinic. "This is Morgan, our new communications director," Henry introduced. "She's going to document our visit for the partnership project." Formal introductions followed. Jack appeared to welcome them, and Emily observed with interest the meeting of the two men, so different in style and personality, but united by professional interest and, although Henry didn't know it, by their presence in her life. The technical visit went better than Emily had expected. Henry seemed genuinely impressed with the facilities and especially with the results obtained in such a short time. Morgan photographed everything, occasionally asking technical questions that demonstrated surprising knowledge about conservation. "You've managed to create something special here," Henry complimented while examining the digitized records of animals in recovery. "The combination of technology with traditional techniques is fascinating." At lunch, served on the veranda of the ranch house with a view of the pastures, the conversation naturally flowed to more personal matters. Henry talked about the center in the capital, the bureaucratic difficulties, the new research. He avoided, Emily noticed, any mention of the personal relationship they had almost had. "And how is Charles?" he asked at one point, surprising Emily with the reminder of her adoptive father. "Getting better every day," she replied, genuinely touched by his interest. "He can already walk with minimal support and is regaining his speech." "It was because of him that you discovered everything, wasn't it?" Morgan suddenly asked, her intense gaze fixed on Emily. "Your true origin." A momentary silence fell over the table. The question, although made without apparent malice, touched on a sensitive point that had not been mentioned during the professional visit. "Yes," confirmed Emily, deciding on honesty. "If he hadn't gotten sick, I might never have discovered that Jack is my biological father." "Destiny," commented Morgan, with an enigmatic smile, or as we prefer to call it in communications, perfect narrative. Something in the young woman's tone bothered Emily, as if her personal story were just material for an interesting story. Henry, noticing the discomfort, quickly changed the subject. After lunch, they proceeded to the final part of the visit, the main pasture, where the buffalo, including Thunder and the recently recovered mother with her calf, grazed peacefully. "This is the real star of our center," explained Emily, indicating the light-coated buffalo. "Her rescue brought attention to our work and helped increase donations." As they approached the fence, the sky suddenly darkened. The clouds that had accumulated on the horizon during the morning now covered the sun, bringing a premature darkness. "Maybe we should go back," suggested Jack, looking worriedly at the sky. "These summer storms can be dangerous." "Just a few more photos," insisted Morgan, already positioning the camera. "The dramatic lighting is perfect for the material we're preparing." Reluctantly, Jack agreed. Emily, however, felt a growing uneasiness. The buffalo, normally calm at that time of day, showed signs of agitation. Thunder, especially, seemed alert, his ears moving constantly, sniffing the air as if perceiving something that humans couldn't detect. "Something's wrong," she murmured to Jack. Before he could respond, an intense flash cut across the sky, immediately followed by a deafening roar. The lightning struck a few meters from the pasture, hitting a solitary tree that immediately began to burn. It was as if a switch had been flipped. The buffalo, frightened by the thunder and the smell of smoke, entered into a collective panic. Like a dark wave of muscles and horns, the herd began to run haphazardly, snorting and raising dust with their powerful hooves. "Get away from the fence," shouted Jack, pulling Morgan by the arm. "When they're like this, they can knock down any obstacle." Henry and Morgan quickly backed away, but Emily remained motionless, her eyes fixed on the panicking herd. Through the curtain of dust, she saw something that froze her blood. The small light-coated calf had fallen and was unable to get up. Its mother, instead of fleeing with the rest of the herd, remained by its side, trying to protect it from the confusion. "The calf will be trampled," shouted Emily, already moving toward the side gate of the pasture. "Emily, no!" Jack tried to reach her, but she was already opening the gate and entering the pasture. The chaos was complete. Buffalo ran in all directions. The storm finally broke, with full force transforming the ground into slippery mud. Emily advanced against the wind, using her knowledge of animal behavior to avoid being hit. She reached the fallen calf at the moment when the herd, in its frantic run, changed direction. The mother buffalo was desperately trying to lift the calf with her muzzle, but the small animal seemed to have twisted a leg in the fall and was moaning in pain. "Come on, little one." Emily knelt in the mud, quickly examining the injured leg. "We need to get you out of here." The rain lashed her face, making it difficult to see. She heard distant shouts. Jack, Henry, perhaps other ranch workers who had noticed the danger, but her concentration was totally focused on the calf. With a quick movement, she hugged the small buffalo, trying to lift it. It was heavier than she expected, and the mud made the task almost impossible. The mother buffalo watched anxiously, torn between the instinct to flee and the need to protect the calf. It was then that Emily saw it. Like a dark wall advancing rapidly, the herd was coming back in her direction, still panicking from the continuous thunder and the burning tree, despite the rain. In seconds they would be hit. She, the calf, and its mother. "Run!" shouted Jack from the fence, desperation evident in his voice. "Leave them, Emily! Run!" But she knew there was no time to run, and she couldn't abandon the calf. In a moment of absolute clarity, she did the only thing her instinct dictated. She stood between the approaching herd and the fallen calf, opened her arms in a gesture of protection, and faced the panicking buffalo. Time seemed to slow down. The rain fell like silver curtains between her and the animals in stampede. Emily could clearly distinguish the wide eyes of the buffalo, the steam coming from their nostrils, the thunderous sound of their hooves on the soaked earth. She closed her eyes, preparing for the impact, but the impact never came. When she opened her eyes again, she saw something that defied all logic. Thunder, the imposing leader of the herd, had positioned himself between her and the other buffalo. With his head low and his impressive horns turned toward the herd, he emitted deep and authoritative sounds. One by one, the buffalo began slowing down until they stopped completely, a few meters away. The scene was surreal. Amid the storm, a young woman, a fallen calf, its mother, and a huge adult buffalo formed a strange picture of mutual protection. The rest of the herd, now calmer, slowly dispersed to the sides, as if an invisible barrier had been erected by thunder. From the fence, Jack, Henry, and Morgan watched stupefied. Morgan, completely forgetting the danger, frantically photographed the extraordinary scene. "It's him," murmured Jack, his voice almost inaudible under the rain. "The same buffalo she saved as a child." "Impossible," replied Henry, incredulous. "No animal would remember after so long." "Some bonds transcend our understanding," said Jack simply. When the storm finally subsided, Emily managed to take the injured calf out of the pasture, with Thunder escorting them at a respectful distance. The mother buffalo followed right behind, still visibly agitated, but trusting the human who had already proven her worth once. In the stable, while treating the calf's twisted leg, Emily was still trembling, not from fear, but from a deep emotion she couldn't completely name. Henry entered silently, offering a dry towel and a mug of hot coffee. "You could have died," he said, without beating around the bush. "It was the bravest and most idiotic thing I've ever seen anyone do." Emily accepted the coffee, feeling the heat of the drink gradually restore her body temperature. "I couldn't leave them," she responded simply. Henry observed her in silence for a few moments, a new understanding dawning in his eyes. "Now I understand," he finally said. "Why we could never have worked out, you and I. You belong to this place, to these animals, to this land. It wasn't just a phase, as I thought. It's who you are." "It always was," she confirmed, without any regret. "I just needed to come back to discover it." In the hours that followed, while the ranch recovered from the scare, the rescue became the main topic among everyone. Workers who had witnessed from a distance told and retold how Thunder had protected Emily, how the entire herd had stopped before the buffalo leader's authority. "It's as if he knew exactly who you are," commented one of the oldest handlers, "as if you had some special connection." That night, when Henry and Morgan had already left, she, with hundreds of photos and a much more impactful story than she had come to seek, Emily sat on the ranch house porch beside Jack. The sky, now clear after the storm, displayed bright stars that seemed close enough to touch. "You could have," Jack began, his voice still choked by the memory of the danger. "But it didn't happen," Emily gently interrupted. "Thunder wouldn't allow it." "How did you know?" he asked, turning to face her. "How did you know he would intervene?" Emily remained, silent for a long moment, contemplating the question. When she finally answered, her voice was soft, almost a whisper. I didn't know, not rationally. But there was something deeper, a certainty that comes from a place beyond logic. The same certainty I felt when I saved that calf so many years ago, as if somehow we recognized each other beyond time. Recognition, repeated Jack, savoring the word. It's a good way to define it. It's more than gratitude, continued Emily, trying to explain the inexplicable. It's as if there existed a silent language between us, something ancestral, something that perhaps comes from here. She touched her chest, and from here, she pointed to the earth beneath her feet. Jack smiled, placing an affectionate arm around his daughter's shoulders. The old Marshalls believed that our family had a pact with the land and its guardians, that the blood that runs in our veins carries memories older than ourselves. I always thought they were just stories for children. And now? Asked Emily, leaning against her father. Now? He looked at the starry sky, then at the distant pasture, where the buffalo rested peacefully under the moonlight. Now I know there are truths that don't fit in science books, truths we need to feel to understand. The next morning, the first edition of the local newspaper featured on its cover one of Morgan's photographs, Emily standing in the storm, protecting the fallen calf, while Thunder positioned himself as a living shield between her and the danger. The headline was simple but powerful: Guardians, the Extraordinary Reunion. In the days that followed, the story went viral nationally. Journalists from major outlets appeared in Hope Springs, wanting to interview the Buffalo Woman, as Emily had come to be known. The Rehabilitation Center received partnership offers from universities and research institutes. The story of the saved calf that years later returned the favor by saving its benefactor touched hearts far beyond the borders of the small town. 3 months after the incident, on a golden autumn afternoon, Emily walked along the trail that skirted the Marshall Ranch, the same trail she had walked so many times as a child, the same one that had led her to that first decisive encounter with the buffalo calf. Now, however, she was not alone. Charles, still supported by a cane, but with increasingly firm steps, walked beside her. Betty held his other arm, attentive to any sign of fatigue, and a little ahead, Jack guided the small group, occasionally stopping to point out a plant or a bird. Strange to think it all started here, commented Charles, when they reached the exact spot where, so many years before, Emily had found the calf separated from its mother. Or maybe it didn't start here, replied Jack, looking significantly at Emily. Maybe it just continued something that already existed long before. Betty smiled, affectionately squeezing her daughter's arm. What matters is that we're all together now. A family, different perhaps, but still a family. The best anyone could wish for, completed Emily, feeling more complete than ever before. When they returned to the ranch, they were greeted by a sight that drew smiles from everyone. Near the fence of the main pasture, Thunder observed their arrival with that serene dignity that characterized him, and by his side, growing strong and healthy, the light-coated calf that Emily had saved during the storm. He's growing fast, commented Charles, observing the young buffalo. Like our Emily, said Betty with a nostalgic smile. In the blink of an eye they stop being calves and find their own path. But they never forget where they came from, added Jack, with a meaningful look at Emily, nor who helped them on the journey. Emily approached the fence, extending her hand to touch Thunder's muzzle. The great buffalo slightly inclined his head, in that gesture that had become a ritual between them, a mutual recognition, a silent confirmation of a bond that defied rational explanations. Thank you, she whispered, although she knew words weren't necessary between them. The sun was beginning to set on the horizon of Hope Springs, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. The small town was still there, with its own rhythm, its traditions, its time that seemed to run more slowly. But for Emily, this time was no longer a burden or a limitation. It was a gift, an opportunity to fully live each moment, each connection, each discovery. In her chest, her heart beat in the same rhythm as the earth beneath her feet, the seasons that succeeded each other, the life that pulsed in every creature around her. It was the rhythm of belonging, of recognition, of return. It was the rhythm of the circular journey that, after so many turns and detours, had finally brought her home, not just to a physical place, but to the center of herself. And there, surrounded by those she loved, her adoptive parents who had raised her with devotion, her biological father rediscovered by the work of destiny, and the animals that had always understood her deepest soul more profoundly than many humans, Emily, finally understood. Her gift had never been just the ability to communicate with animals, but the ability to recognize and honor the invisible bonds that connect all living creatures. That was the true legacy of the Marshalls, and also of the Wilsons. A legacy that didn't depend on surnames or blood, but on the capacity to love beyond imposed boundaries, to protect the vulnerable, to see with the heart what the eyes don't always reach. And as the first star appeared in the gradually darkening sky, Emily knew with a certainty that came from the depths of her soul that she had found not only her origins, but her purpose. A purpose that, like the majestic thunder at her side, would remain firm before any storm that life might still bring.